Hi, I'm Crispin Thompson. I'm on the Culture Matters podcast.
Crispin, um, good morning.
Good morning.
I'm thinking you're the second person who has this name Crispin that I know. What's the origin from that?
It's an English name by origin,
Yeah.
though in terms of how I ended up with that name, I can't tell you. My mother chose it. She's no longer around to tell me why, but here we are. And it's funny, growing up, I never met any other Crispins. I was not aware of any other Crispins. And a number of years ago, I had an opportunity to rotate to the UK and
Mhm.
worked there for about a year. And it was not like I ran into them every day, but there were people that had known other Crispins. And so it was interesting to me to be in a place where it was known and not something that sounds like an adjective to describe bacon
Right.
or something.
Okay. And do people call you Chris or Crispin? Use the full name.
Both either is fine. I usually use Crispin professionally and Chris personally, but I'm open to either.
Okay, okay, okay. All right. So now we know everything about you, but not enough. Because give us a little bit of an introduction about yourself. Well, who are you? That we know more or less. Where are you? And at the on this planet, what do
Sure.
you do? And what is your so-called cultural frame of reference, please?
Yeah, certainly. These are
Yeah.
great. So I'm based in San Antonio, Texas.
Okay.
So in terms of, in the world, it's sort of south and central in Texas. San Antonio as a city, as a cultural city, is very, very old for America. It's more than 300 years old, which
Mhm.
for America is a very old city. For
Yeah.
Europe and maybe the rest of the world, not so old. Today, I own and run a sort of a boutique leadership consulting firm called the Leadership Studio.
Yeah.
And we focus on making leaders reach their potential, helping leaders reach their potential, helping leaders even find their potential. And notice I said leader and not manager. I think if you want to be a better manager, that's on your company to help you do that, because so many different companies have so many different styles.
Yeah.
But leading, connecting with people right in front of you, connecting around the world, that's where I like to focus. And I put a premium on communication, because I think you can be you can be a good leader and an okay communicator, but you cannot be a great leader without being a great communicator. So I want to help people build that up, recognize what they're seeing and hearing, understand how they're, like, what signals are they giving off, how are they being heard, and really help them kind of focus on that area. And I think when you can work to be understood, to hitch your message, to land the topic, to get the yes or the no, or whatever it is you need, then it helps you be a better leader, because your whole team can follow behind you and they have confidence in you that you're going to get done what needs to be done.
Okay. Um, San Antonio, Texas. What time is it now at yours?
9:07 in the morning.
9:07. Okay, it's 10. This is I'm in Quito at this moment in Ecuador.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah,
So
it's
is it?
10 o'clock here. 10 o'clock.
Oh, okay. I wouldn't
Yeah.
have. I was going to go the other direction, but
No, no. Well, we're relatively close, but I'm a lot further
a
south
lot
better.
further
Yeah,
south.
a lot
Yes.
further south. So you talk about leadership, right? Not about managing as such. But I guess that depends also. I mean, this is the Culture Matters podcast on international business.
Hmm.
Different cultures, they considered leadership being different, as in for instance, I'm Dutch. The role of a manager or leader, sorry, in the Netherlands is more to make the surrounding of his people or her people more comfortable. That's the role, and it's not to say, okay, Crispin, you got to do this, and Chris, you have to do this.
Hmm.
No, that's not the role of a Dutch leader. How does that differ across the globe for you in your
You know,
experience?
I think so. I think there's a lot of commonality. I think, there's and I'll give a little story about my first times working with the Dutch too here in a second,
Oh,
because
yes, please.
that's always interesting. But
Yeah.
for me, the a leader is something of a shepherd, and I think no matter where you are, where that exists, sometimes it's more formal and more direct, sometimes it's less formal and more subjective.
Yeah.
But I think a leader as a shepherd, someone who's meant to sort of bring their team or teams along, help them get to the right place or the right goal, and help to make sure that they understand what that goal is. I think that's a when we talk about kind of the difference between managing and leading, managing is often much more around tasks. Like we have things to do, we need to do this.
Yeah.
Leading is making sure we understand what's the impact, what's the outcome, what are we trying to
Where we're
achieve here,
going. Yeah.
and why, by the way, too. The why is
Yeah.
often irrelevant when you're a manager. You have a task, this is what we have to do. We have to do it because we are told to do it. But if a good leader can translate the why here, help maybe translate maybe the directions from above organizationally into how do we get this. But I think this kind of notion of being a shepherd, I think, is a great way, because there's if you can get the whole group there, it's great, but there's always going to be pieces that have a tendency to want to move off in one direction or another, and the leader needs to watch for that. They need to
Yeah.
make sure, they need to understand also, again, the why is this group being a little less with the overall group? Why do we need to kind of pull them back in? What it would take to pull them back in sometimes. And again, we talk about the culture matters piece of this. Different cultures is their place. Some places you need to be more direct, because
Yeah.
that is what's intended and expected there. In some cases, you need to be much less direct, much more soft in order to achieve the same goal. I said I was going to talk about the first time
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
worked
That
with
scares me.
the Dutch, and it's funny. So when I was quite young when I went to Europe. I was 25 or something, and it
Mhm.
was my first big rotation. And at the time, it was with Compaq. So I worked for one company that got bought by another, that bought by Compaq, that eventually went to HP. And so I was there for 25 years. But for me, it ended up being a number of different companies. So I rotated when I was about 25 to Europe. I lived in the UK, but I was working across a bunch of different countries. And not only was this my first big assignment, I'd never been out of the country. In fact, everything happened so quickly that I was told, yes, you're going. And then I was like, oh, I guess I need a passport. So I needed to go get a passport, like an emergency passport. I had to go to an office and actually talk to human beings and get everything done. And I don't even know if that's possible these days with the way everything works. But this
Yeah.
was this was pre 9/11, so things were a little easier on that front. and
Yeah.
and and then off I went. And then immediately started working with, this was a kind of a global office. It was actually in Scotland, and we had a bunch of people from a bunch of different places. And so I'm learning accents, and having never been out of the country, the accent in Glasgow is strong. And there were times when I knew I was speaking English and I knew they were speaking English, but
It
never
didn't
the two
really
shall
match.
meet.
Yeah.
So we had to work through that. And then as we started to expand the work, we started pulling a few people from each of we call them wave one countries, but think of them as the biggest countries in Europe, and from a revenue perspective. So France and Germany, Netherlands and Switzerland and things. And when the folks came over from our office in Utrecht, I I felt like immediately they didn't feel, and I mean this in a very positive way. This is going to sound very
Go
very
ahead.
small-minded as an American, but I immediately felt the connection, because first of all, the English was amazing.
Mhm.
Amazing, very, very flat accent from my ears. English was amazing. So again, as a very young, inexperienced international worker, I appreciated that. And then the humor was exactly aligned to mine. This sort of dark joke, dark humor, sarcastic thing.
Yeah, it
I just
is.
felt like this, if I needed to rotate to a different country and live, that's where I want to go. That was,
Okay.
it was, and everyone was so tall. Again, I had so little experience with the world when I got there. And then it was, I had a great time there. I've only been there a few times, but this, always expecting the sort of dark humor comment or the aside, and with a little bit of sarcasm, it was very funny to me to
Yeah.
get that, because we were talking to them at the same time as we were talking to the Germans, and it's a different mindset. It's
Oh
a
yeah,
different
it is.
approach.
It is.
Not as much, let's say, humor, right? In the front, although I think Germans have a great sense of humor when you get there. But
Yeah, they do have they even the Germans have a sense of humor. That's so. But the point with the German humor is that for the Germans, humor is a serious thing. That sounds a bit contrary, but the point is you're not supposed to be funny all the time, every time. You don't start something serious with with a joke as an icebreaker, because you would actually undermine the seriousness of the message that you want to give, right? That
Yeah.
you want to bring. So let me. I don't prep a lot for these podcasts, hardly ever. But that's not because I'm lazy. I just prefer to go with the flow. In
Yeah.
your experience, because it says in your bio that you have a lot of experience managing large or big international teams.
Hmm.
What's the biggest hurdle that you find in your experience? Of course, being an American, because that also colors it if you want your point of view, no?
You know, I think this is a little bit maybe counterintuitive, but I think one of the biggest challenges I had, especially if I moved into a new organization or took over a new team, was getting really honest responses about what's not working.
Hmm.
So I think, especially if I think about India and for sure China,
Yeah,
when I took over teams there, when I would say, "How can I help you?" "Oh, everything's great." "What
yeah,
do you need?" "We're fine." Getting them to be honest about that and not just say what they thought I wanted to hear. And so for me, like in China, I had to really work to let them understand that I wanted to help, that it's okay if something doesn't work. It's okay if something's broken. It's okay if you made a mistake. We want to
yeah.
focus on how do we get better. And in India, it was funny because my the folks that were there that directly reported to me were very strong and strong-willed and had no problem telling me, but it was the next layer down where the work got done that I felt it was harder to understand what's really happening here and how do we get to that. There's a much more hierarchical piece
In
there
India,
and
you're talking still, right?
in India,
Yeah,
Yeah. And trying to understand the layers, trying to get people to understand that from a leadership style, I'm not particularly focused on hierarchy, that I tend to run a more of a flat organization, even if there are management layers. For me, it's much more important to be able to reach across, reach down. And I think that was a little bit shocking when I first started working with India because they weren't used to someone who was maybe their boss's boss reaching
hmm,
out to them directly. I would get very, very funny phone calls after I had pinged someone on Teams or Slack or whatever, and then their boss's boss calls me and said, "Hey, this person thinks you're going to fire them." And I said, "No, I just have a question about this. There's the only reason I'm reaching out, but I knew
yeah,
they're the person that knows this." So helping them, kind of get through that trepidation
yeah.
of a leader that's willing to kind of work across, which maybe is non-typical in there. In other places, it's interesting where like I have a long, long history working with Mexico, and I feel like I understand that culture well and how to engage there, and could probably run any kind of operation there at all, just because I understand how to get out of that. But other places around the world were sometimes not so easy in the beginning. In fact, I was just talking about this the other day. I think I had an amazing team in Romania, but Romania was a tough office. The people were tough. They were not afraid to say no. They were not afraid to
Hmm.
push back, to challenge, to question. And it took me a while to understand: am I doing something wrong? Is this, are they just so unhappy that they want to change? And there's always a mix, right? There's a mix of things.
Yeah,
So I had to kind of change my messaging. I have a background in history, which I think actually maybe helped me in this one case to kind of think about maybe what's going on culturally here, right? So it's not so long ago that things in Romania were very, very tough,
yeah.
and leadership in Romania was very authoritarian, very direct, and
You're
they
talking
put
about
up.
Ceausescu, right? The time
Yeah,
that they were
exactly.
still part of
Yeah,
the
yeah,
Soviet Union. Yeah,
yeah, exactly. And all this. And so the people that work for me didn't have the direct experience, but their parents did, right? And for
yeah.
sure they would have grown up hearing, "You don't trust them, they're liars," all this. And so I felt like maybe I wasn't getting that direct a pushback. But so for me, working with Romania meant that I needed to think about, okay, I shouldn't be so broad in my speech. I should think about, okay, here's exactly what we're doing. And I talked more about that why piece. I felt like the why was very important there.
Yeah.
Being able to explain the why, help them get along. And I have nothing but respect. I think the talent level there was off the charts, and it was a fantastic experience, but it wasn't always easy, especially in the beginning when I took over those teams.
I was reading your bio in terms because I do prep a little bit, but not that
Mhm.
much. And I was wondering, is there like an 80/20 rule in how you approach teams? But from what I get back from you now, I don't think it is like that. I mean, a team in India is different from a team in Romania, from the Netherlands, from Germany, from the US, or
I think as a leader, and certainly in my style, I try to meet them where they are. And so rather than try to bring everyone exactly to here's how I'm going to run things, I'm pretty transparent and open that I have a style and I'm going to reach down across the organization. But
yeah,
if I see that they aren't there, and I try to be very observant. I think an observant leader is the way I was described in the past, but I try to be very observant, and that means not just watching but listening. And sometimes you're listening for what's said, sometimes you're listening for what wasn't, and trying to kind of
yeah, yeah.
tease there to that point. Eventually, if I've got six different sites around the world, I cannot run myself six different ways. So you do eventually have to get closer to an 80
You
20
have a
type.
personal style as well, and a cultural
Yeah,
colored personal
yeah.
style. Yeah,
But you can't. I don't think I can do that from the beginning. I don't think it's successful,
yeah.
at least not for me.
Yeah. And is there, I don't know, I'm not sure if this is a good question. Are there easier cultures to work with for you as with your upbringing, your style, your cultural upbringing, etc., or more difficult cultures? I mean, the reason I'm asking this is because I work with different cultures around the world, and for me, and this says more something about me than about the culture, and I'm talking about Japanese culture, which is
Mm.
for me as a European so difficult. They're so different from my background, etc., and my experience. How does that go for you?
I think I wouldn't say there's any one that's better than any other. I have a
No, no,
familiarity. I
no,
have a
no. It's
familiarity
it's
with Mexico.
easier or more difficult. It's
Yeah,
not good or
yeah, and I
bad.
think
That's not
from
what
a
I'm
from an
talking about.
ease perspective, I have familiarity in Mexico because I've been doing it for so long, and I speak a lot of the language, and I can interact there in a way that's maybe different than other executives coming from the U.S.
Yeah,
But from a challenge perspective, you know the I'll echo Japan a little bit. I wouldn't say what was interesting there was just kind of understanding. First of all, the time difference was always brutal. Brutal. It didn't matter who was on the call. It was so rough for them. And so you'd wind up with people that are on the phone at an hour that I couldn't imagine, 2 a.m., 3 a.m. or something, right? And so that was tough. Understanding the notion of they said yes, but is that yes they agreed or yes they heard you? I
yeah,
think
yeah,
getting to this, okay, let's ask the next question. What I need to understand is, are we going to do this?
yeah.
Then if it's a yes or no, then at least we have familiarity. And of course, what's also interesting about Japan is it's not just cultural in terms of the human interaction. Business practices there tend to be different as well. And so, as an example, at HPE, where I was there for a long time, right, our business in Japan operated a little bit different than it did elsewhere. I think they were on a separate fiscal year. They were
Mhm.
they were on they had I dealt a lot with our partners who sold on our behalf, and in Japan their partner model was unique. Only in Japan did it operate like that, and
Mhm.
nowhere else in the world. And so I think, and I don't know if that's true with other vendors, but I do know that for us it was sufficiently different that it meant that beyond language, beyond time zone, all these things, it was difficult for me to run work for Japan outside of Japan for a lot of scale.
Mhm.
Other than that, I think there were places that were less easy in the beginning, but they got there over time. But I'll say all this, but I would also say the same thing is true in the US. So after I left HPE, I went to a company called Taskus, and I was running North America for them. So all of my employees were in North America, which was super unique because when I left HPE, I had no employees in the US, and so it was a complete flip flop for me. And huge organization, thousands of people, but in different locations. And I found even that was true. Like inside the US, even though I would say I understand the culture here quite a bit, certain work, certain centers, certain sites were easier than others.
Mhm.
And so I think we talk about the kind of an international thing, but I think even within a country, you would find things to be different. And just talking about China again, I had a lot of folks in Dalian, China, which is in the Northeast.
Yeah.
But in Beijing, it was different. You know, the operating in Dalian was very different from operating in Beijing. Dalian, I think was they were much more focused on we're going to do the work, we're going to churn, we're it was like I said, maybe harder to get them in the beginning to tell me what's not working.
Hmm.
But Beijing's a much more international city
Yeah,
and
yeah,
and
yeah.
a
Makes
lot more
sense.
experience with Westerners coming in and talking. And so their pushback was different, their interactions were different. And so like I said, even within a country, same thing in India, Bangalore versus Chennai for me was different, not maybe as hugely different as say Beijing to Dalian,
Yeah.
but was still different cultures, different. And I think Americans, we look at a map and we don't understand scale, how big some of these countries are too. Let's like
Yeah, true.
saying,
That's
oh,
it. That's yeah.
like in Los Angeles, it must be the same as New York, but holy cow, that's a
Yeah.
big difference.
Well, what you're talking about here are not so much cultural differences, but intra-cultural differences. They're
Hmm.
differences within one country. And
Yeah,
for me, as being a Dutchman, for me, an American is an American is an American. But for you, if you go to New York from Texas or to Los Angeles, the other way, you will see the differences
yeah,
as they exist here in Ecuador, where I'm or currently, as they exist in the Netherlands as well. So those are called intracultural differences and not so much intercultural differences.
yeah, for sure.
I don't know why I made a note somewhere, mental note, that you link AI to leadership. Is
Yeah,
that is that
so
correct? Because and the
yeah.
reason I'm asking this as well, because it's interesting, because I get more and more invitations from people who want to talk about culture and artificial intelligence. So break this ice for us a bit.
Well, so it started with when I launched the Leadership Studio maybe about a year ago now, when I kind of got to the point when I decided this was what I was supposed to be doing.
Yeah,
I started doing all these things and I was feeling very spread thin. And I wasn't ready to invest in, let me go get more people to help me. And so I knew lots of tools out there. I had, some experience operating with AI tools, but minimal. And I'm not technical
yeah,
by any significant definition. But what I needed was the ability to scale in areas that I just didn't have the time or inclination to scale at, not have my life and my business running at the same time.
yeah.
So I started focusing first there on how can I have AI just help me run the business, help chase things that I do or this. And then as I started to kind of build new functionality, I realized that I could have AI more embedded in what we do. We have a leadership assessment, which is something similar to like a Myers-Briggs or a DISC, that sort of thing, but something that's proprietary to us.
Mhm.
And so when people go through and they take the survey and they fill out the questions, I have AI that does an evaluation and helps me work with the algorithm and kind of create here's the archetype that you fit in, and here's where you're likely to be strong and likely to be struggling based on responses. So that was kind
Yeah.
of the first area. But then where I get really excited was obviously the coaching aspect of what I do is the best part, right? Because that's interacting with people, it's
That's
seeing them
yeah, human to human. Yeah.
human to human, right? And seeing them improve is fantastic, right? From day one to day 30 to day 60 or whatever. But that's once a week often when I'm working with someone like maybe
Mhm.
pursuing a certification, something like that. So it's once a week over so many weeks. And I realized that what they needed was something in between. And I thought, well, what if I could just use AI to be an adjunct coach? So I started working on that, and now I have that. I've built an AI coach that's fully trained in how I coach and can assess. So people in between sessions, they can engage with this thing called Studio Coach, and they
Mhm.
can they can ask it questions, or they can say, hey, I've got this thing just hit my desk. I'm struggling to understand what's the right approach. It can give them advice. Again, anchors back in my own coaching,
Your
my own
style and yeah.
styles.
Yeah.
And then I started adding more functionality to it. So if they've got a presentation that they have given or they want to give, they can record it and they can upload it to the AI. It can then evaluate them on tone and structure and pacing and the other things we kind of watch for from a communications perspective. And that's where it became super exciting to me, because not only does it give me scale to maybe cover more people and therefore
Mhm.
hopefully more revenue, but for the individuals, it makes them feel more connected to the coaching. For the ones that use it, and by and large, the ones that have access have used it. But it makes them feel more connected to the coaching because they've got this continued voice. And I have been told, I might tone it down a little bit, but I have been told that the way it sort of talks back to them sounds very much like me and can be very blunt in the
Okay.
coaching style, which is good. That's what I want, right? I want them to not, AI has a lot of benefits, but one, especially on the GPTs, they can be effusive, right? They can, oh, you're great, you're awesome. It's overly praiseworthy. And, and,
Yeah.
and I didn't want that. So training it to not be like that, providing instruction sets to follow this, anchoring back to the core tenets of the leadership studio was super exciting. And so that to me is really, it's one of the best things we do. And we've gotten some, we have an award for it. We've gotten some praise for these things
Yeah.
because I think it's just different enough. Maybe in a year, 2 years, 3 years, maybe every one of my competitors are doing something similar. But for now, I think it allowed me to differentiate enough. And again, the feedback has been overwhelmingly positive.
Okay.
And what I love about it is that I built it. So I
Yeah, of
know
course. There's a bit
it's
of
not I have
pride, is there, right?
a lot of
Yeah.
pride.
Yeah.
And it's funny, one thing I talk about sometimes and to coach people I'm coaching is imposter syndrome, right? That
Ah, yeah.
infects us all at times,
Yeah.
and I fought that every step of the way doing this. I kept thinking, why am I doing this? Am I the right person to do this? I didn't want to
Yeah.
pay anyone else, so that cheapness maybe helped me,
Just
but
very quickly, Crispin, the imposter syndrome, for those of the audience that doesn't know what that is that you're doing something and you actually think, should I be doing this? Am I good enough to do this? So you think
yeah,
you're actually pretending like you're someone else, right?
yeah,
That's the
it,
imposter
it,
syndrome.
yeah, or anyone else but me would be the right person. I think that's how it plays
Yeah.
out
Yeah.
sometimes, and
Yeah.
for sure in my own career has played out like that. But I think what the same thing I fought this whole way. Why am I doing this? And then I had this great conversation maybe 6 or 8 weeks ago with someone who is I would consider very, very learned in all things AI. And he and I were talking about this, and he came away with impressed with how it done. I was like, good Lord, maybe maybe this is pretty good because I thought, just something I had built and it kind of grew along the way. And now I have a bunch of other AI tools that I use
Yeah.
for a bunch of things to just to kind of shore up the business in a lot of
Sure.
areas. And I have some niche things I do as well.
Differentiates. Yeah. Okay. That's
Yeah.
important. Crispin, I look at the clock and we're about 30 minutes in the conversation, and I'd like to keep these conversations around 30 minutes.
Mhm.
So I have two more questions to ask for you, and I am going to make notes as we do this. Can you give us three tips to become more culturally competent from your own
Yeah.
experience, from your life experience, or your work experience, either way? Just give us three tips if you can.
I think the patience is the first one. I think whenever you're engaging with a new culture, you've got to have this patience that things may not operate at the speed that you're expecting. Some that may be faster or slower, but patience to kind of seek out to understand what's going on in front. I think this willingness to listen,
Yeah.
because I think that's super, super important. Kind of hearing them in their own voice, let them go. And then, because cultural differences often imply some degree of language or communication difference, and not everyone speaks the language you speak and the way you
Mhm.
speak it. I think it's very, very important to listen for intent. So sometimes the way someone says something may feel unnecessarily vague, or it may feel abrupt or aggressive. But when we're in the room with someone, we can read body language, we can understand
Yeah.
maybe what's going on and what's about. But oftentimes interactions are like this, right? They're over camera, and it's harder to do. And sometimes the camera's off, right? So it's even less.
Yeah.
So I think as leaders, we can take a breath and listen for intent. I think that's very important, because if we try to think about, okay, here's what they said. If we just read the words and we
Literally
didn't know how
word
they
by
said it,
word by word. Yeah.
word by word, yeah, and then ask clarifying questions, parrot, repeat back to them. Oh, here's what I just heard. I want to make sure that I understand. Are you concerned about this? Are you excited about that? But let that cycle through. So those are I think those are great coachings for anyone in any situation, but especially when we're working, across borders, across cultures.
Yeah. Okay. I'm making some notes here because otherwise I forget. So those are good points, and different points as well. So there's a lot of focus on language with you and interpretation of language, and also what you I think what you also say is you listen for what is not said,
Mhm.
as in to what is physically said. Yeah. So if Crispin, if people want to get in touch with you and know more about the leadership studio, how can they do that?
I think, simplest way is our website, which is leadership-studio.com. I think that's the simplest way. Everyone can always find me or the company on LinkedIn as well. And there is theoretically an Instagram site, but let's call it dormant at best right now. It needs to be made a little
Revamped.
bigger. And for those that may be also interested, I think the other, along with AI, I have a lot of focus around why being human is important right now and how these
Yeah.
connections, these human connections. So I've also written a book which is called The Human Advantage: Emotional Intelligence in the Age of AI, and it's really just about this, like why it's so important, especially right now, that we as leaders continue to build those right human connections between each other, because we have all this noise in front of us that AI can and will do every other job, and I think that's not true today on
Not yet.
late November 2025, but for now we do have an advantage as people, and I think that's it
Yeah.
started not even as a idea for a book, just a way for me to collect my notes and thoughts around teaching more in emotional intelligence, and eventually I decided someone might want to read this.
Yeah. Good. It'll be in the show notes for sure. Plus your LinkedIn link and the website link as well. Crispin, it's
Awesome.
been a pleasure. Thank you so much for coming on the show, and I'm pretty sure we'll bump into each other in the future.
Good stuff. Yeah, great conversation, Chris. Really enjoyed it.
Thank you.